Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to teach you how to make a composite in Photoshop of a cowboy. Hi everyone and welcome to Kelvin Designs. My name is Kelvin and I design, and that's why it's called Kelvin Designs. In this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make a composite in Photoshop taking this photo of me and blending it with this background. All right, there's a few really neat tricks along the way, some selection, some color work, and all in all quite simple. However, if you really want to get everything out of this tutorial, I highly recommend click on the description below. There's a link where you can download the raw file to this episode, so the cowboy and the background, and that way when you're in Photoshop and following along this tutorial, you can actually do everything as I say it, as opposed to just hear me talking about it. All right, so we'll start, and pretty simple techniques. We'll start with some selections and dealing with some raw files, and let's get started. Once you've downloaded the files, you get actually a zip file. You can double click it on Mac or decompress it in Windows. You'll get a folder with a cowboy and a landscape, and the first thing you want to do is open the cowboy in Photoshop, and you can right click open with. If it doesn't show up here, you can just drag it into the dock where I have the Photoshop icon right there, and it'll open up in, this is actually, it'll be Camera Raw in Photoshop. A couple important things here is you see it says open object, and actually by default it doesn't say that. So you have to get this, and what this means is we're keeping a smart object. So anything that we do is non-destructive, and we're keeping that raw file. To get that, you have to click on here, this little underline specifications of the image, and when you once you click it, you get this little window. It says open in Photoshop as smart object, and that way it's non-destructive. Okay, so you check that box, hit OK, and then you can open the object. Now the good thing about it is I can always go back, do some modifications. Everything is non-destructive, and we're keeping the raw file intact. I'm going to go ahead and open that, and the first thing we have to do is actually outline it. Okay, it's a pretty sharp image, got quite a few detail in the selection here to do, but yeah, so we could go ahead and do a quick selection, and because this is pretty high resolution and I want the selection to be really detailed, I always do manual selections on high quality images. Okay, so to do that, the first step is we're going to zoom in quite a bit here. Let's go maybe 200 or 300. Okay, we're going to go into quick mask mode here, or hit Q, and you don't see a difference, but it basically anything that we draw here. So I'm going to take the brush tool, B for brush. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say I want 45 pixel size, and 85 hardness is always what I go with on a selection. Now what that looks like, and make sure your opacity here is at 100% and your flow is at 100%. What happens is I'm drawing here, and when I go out of quick mask mode, whatever I drew is now selected. Okay, there's a preference in Photoshop here just in case you have it showing it differently. Some people, it has masked areas, so when I go in quick mask mode, it's the opposite. So whatever I'm drawing in white is selected. Okay, I prefer the selected areas method. That way I paint what I want selected. Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and deselect that, or Command D, and let's start the outlining process. I'm going to zoom in actually to 300%. And so the method that I use is I do a slightly soft edge so that I can modify it after, and I brush in a quick mask mode. Now, because I don't want to have to keep my finger on the mouse the whole time and do extremely accurate movements with my mouse, I click, let's go to quick mask mode. Okay, I click, and then I hold down the shift key, and what happens is it'll make a line between my two clicks. I clicked here and I clicked here and I made a line. Okay, so in practice what happens is, and I'm going to actually make this brush a little bit smaller for this just to get some more detail. 25 is pretty good, and just click and hold down the shift key the whole time, and you're basically connecting the dots. Okay. All right, now we're zooming to 300%, so we have a lot of detail, and that's also so that if we're a little bit off, it's kind of forgiving. Okay, and that's the whole point here. We want to have a very realistic outline to change that background and make it look very realistic, very real. All right, when you have little sharp sort of corners, then you can let go of the shift key and just draw in a few little brush strokes in there. All right, so the trick is try to keep it smooth, and if you need to zoom in a little more, see I'm a little off here, but it doesn't really matter. I do have a slightly soft edge, and so this process usually takes between 10 and 15 minutes, but you will get a much better result than if you used any of the automatic selection methods. As you can tell, there's some grain in here, and automatic selections, while they do a good job for a quick fix, when you want to do some high quality work, I really recommend you just take the 10 or 15 minutes it takes and make your manual selection. So I'm going to repeat this process around all the edges. If there's any, so I'm going to speed run you through this. You don't have to watch me select this whole thing in 10 or 15 minutes. If there's any details, I'll slow it down to explain a few little nuances to really get this selection method effective and very accurate. Okay, so in some cases it'll be a little dark and it'll be hard to see the edges. So what I recommend is go to your layers and create a levels or a curves and just lighten the whole image. You're not trying to color correct, you're just trying to see the edges, okay? So you can leave that in there, and now it's a lot easier to see that edge. And then you can just keep going. All right, here you'll notice I have a sharp edge and I want to basically make it nice and clean, but then now I went over too far. So what you do in that case is, so black is basically making your selection, so white is going to invert it. So you can either hit these little arrows here or hit X, and now I'm white, so I can brush over that and I made a nice clean edge. Hit X again, I'm back to black as my foreground color, and I can keep going. So anytime you have little edges, you see like in there's a little nook. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the white, hit X, and then now I have a clean edge. Hit X again, back in, filling in the selected areas. And see, I overwent a little too much here. So it's easy to just toggle back and forth between that background and foreground. If you don't have black and white in the front, just hit that little black-white button there, and it gives you the default colors, or the shortcut for that is D for default. And you can just keep going, and that's just another little tidbit when doing this selection method. All right, here where you have some semi-transparent areas like the hair, you really are just aiming for the completely opaque areas. Okay, you don't want to go into that. So we'll just go, and I'm going to kind of just do it a little rough. You don't have to be too detailed here. What we're trying to really capture right now is all the hard edges, and that's obviously not. So just go in here, and then as soon as you get to a hard edge, you can keep going. But if you have an area that has sort of semi-transparent areas, just pick out what's actually opaque. You can fill it in a little more if you want, and then we'll deal with that edge in a second. Okay, now that we've done the whole outline, we obviously have to capture this hole. So we'll do the same process just on the inside and then I'll show you how to fill that in. Okay, I believe we have all the edges, so that's good. All right, next thing I'm going to do, we can go ahead and turn off that. Let's go back to Quick Mask. Let's turn this off. Go in here. I'm going to go back into Quick Mask, so Q. And what we want to do here is basically select everything that needs to be filled in, right? Right now we just have the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and take the magic wand tool and just select right in the middle. And it looks like, it looks like we're on this layer, but in reality, if I open up the channels here, what we're at is this. We're on this channel here, okay? We can still see all the other channels because they're visible, but that let me just select in there. We have a little soft edge, so if I were to fill this in, it would still have some artifacts. So what we want to do is select, modify, and expand, and we could do 10 pixels, right? The brush was about 25, so we should be safe at 10. I hit OK, and then we can hit fill or option delete, which basically fills with the foreground color. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, Command D, and now we have a clean selection of all the hard edges. We still need some work on the soft edges, but all the hard edges, and we can zoom in here and we'll see that it's pretty clean. Okay? All right. What we're going to do now is get out of Quick Mask Q, hit Q or click on that. And when at this stage, just because it takes 10 or 15 minutes to do, I like to save that work. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and it's saved my first selection into an alpha channel. Next thing we're going to do is refine those edges, right? So we're going to go to Select and Mask. The Select and Mask appears when you're on any one. Here, I'm going to get out of this. On any one of the selection tools, you have a little thing that says Select and Mask. So click on that, and here you'll notice that it's inverted, right? And it's not showing my, here we go. Okay, what you want to do is, we already did the main selection. What you want is the Refine Edges brush, which is that second one, okay? So you click on this tool here, and you can hold down the Option and Control, and that'll make your brush bigger and bigger, smaller, or up and down, which makes the edges harder or softer, okay? So this is I'm just going to eyeball it, something like this, okay? Not too much. And let's zoom in. We're going to go by the hair, right? I'll make it a little bit smaller. What you want is basically to tell it, detect the edges where I'm brushing, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click right here, over all this here, over all the hair. If you don't, if there's hair that goes out beyond the brush, it won't detect it. So that was actually really, really good. Did a good job there. Okay, we got some more over here, so I'm going to go ahead and brush on all this hair here, and that should do the trick. Pretty good. And we can even go by the beard, maybe a little bit smaller, and just go on those little hairs, and you'll notice it does a pretty clean job. A little bit over here, maybe a little bit over here. Okay, I noticed there was maybe some by the hand here. Okay, let's zoom out, and we should have a perfect selection. And make sure the output is to selection. You don't want to layer mask or anything like that, okay? Hit OK. We got that selection. I'm going to save it again. So now it's Alpha 2. And our selection is done. So when you go back to your layers, let's make this bigger. And you can just click on the Layer Mask button. And there you go. The selection process is done. So now, next step is dropping it into the background, and then we'll do some color adjustments. All right, let's go back to the Finder where we had the downloaded images. We have the landscape and the cowboy. I'm going to go ahead and open this with Photoshop. Nope, those are the wrong versions. That doesn't show up for some reason. I'm going to drag it into here, Photoshop 2025, and there we go. So this is one of the many backgrounds that Joel Grimes sells, and we're going to use this for this tutorial. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to go to the Move tool here, and on this image, make this one smaller too, Command minus, and I can just go ahead and drag it on here. Okay, the documents are actually different. This is a raw file, this is a JPEG. It might be more interesting not to lose detail and to blow this image up as opposed to shrink this image, although we'll end up with a pretty big image. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK, and let's see what happens here. Okay, this image is 16-bit, and this is probably 8-bit. There we go. So that's kind of normal. Again, this is a smart object to a raw file, so actually completely non-destructive. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this one a little bit bigger. You can go ahead and save this. I'm going to save as, and I'm going to save it as a PSD so that it's has all my layers. Okay, go ahead and close this. It's still saving. All right. Once we're in here, we obviously want to reduce it. So I hit Command T, which is free transform, which you can find over here. I'm going to hit escape so you can see it. Edit, free transform. Okay, so Command T, and then I'm holding down the Option key. Now, by default, you can't do this, right? It'll constrain proportions. So I'm going to undo that, and it'll be, so I hold down, I actually turned that option off. So you have to hold down the Shift key in that case to keep the proportions right. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller yet. I want it something like this. Something like this is about right. Okay, maybe a little bit smaller, but again, this is a smart object, so everything I'm changing here is non-destructive. Hit OK, and you'll notice that our mask is pretty good. Look at that. The hair is really just perfectly outlined. Beard, the hair in the front, the back. So pretty happy with that. All right, next. So the two keys to a good composite is really good selections, and the second key is color. Okay, so these two images have different color spaces, and while there are tools to automatically match it, I actually am going to take some artistic license here and do it manually, because I don't necessarily want exactly this color space or exactly this color space, so we're going to go ahead and do it manually. All right, the first thing I do is take this background and double click on it to turn it into a layer, and then I convert it to a smart object. Okay, again, this means that any adjustments that I do, I'll be able to go back in and do some adjustments later. They're non-destructive. So the first thing I do is on the background, let's go ahead and do camera raw filter. Okay, and here we go. In this, what am I going to do? I usually start with the light, but I don't really have much to change in light. So I'm going to go to the color here, and maybe want a little bit more yellow. That's already pretty good. You can click on the eye to see kind of what you're changing. Okay, so a little more yellow. Maybe tone away from the greens a bit. Well, it's quite a bit. Maybe a little less. So I'm going a little warmer, a little more towards magenta, kind of like a sunset vibe. And maybe boost those colors a bit, or a lot. So yeah, we're getting before, after, yeah. Vibrance has a tendency to boost colors that are in the colder, like blues, for example, and saturation has a tendency to boost colors that are warm. And I do want to boost this a bit as well. Okay, so let's see our color changes before, after. Okay, got a little more pink in the clouds. Feels like a little bit more of a sunset sort of feel. Okay, pretty happy with that overall. Next thing I want to do is maybe brighten up the windmill a bit. I want to add some kind of light in the grass. So let's go ahead and go to the masks here. So this is the first part. This basically adjusts the whole image. And here we can make selections and decide what we're going to be adjusting. The first thing I'm going to do is just do an easy radial gradient. And once you click that, you can go ahead and draw a oval. So I'm going to do that here. My feather is completely maxed out so that it's a very soft edge. And here I'm just going to, I suppose, just brighten it up a bit. Okay, maybe even yellower, maybe even more magenta. Just give it some color. Add some contrast, maybe more brightness. Maybe bring this down a bit. I'm just trying to show, like, see, I'm trying to lighten up this one area. Okay. All right, and then let's go ahead and create a new mask, and we will. Let's see. I want to select the windmill. So let's select object, and we'll draw over the windmill here and that thing over there. And look at that. That's pretty clean. That's pretty good. Let's see what happens here if I lighten it up a bit. It's pretty good. Okay. Now it did have a selection in there, so let's see if we can maybe adjust that a little bit with a brush. I just want to, oh, got rid of it. Okay, subtract, brush, and here my brush size is 7. Let's go down to like 3. Let's do flow much lower. I just want to get rid of some of this in here, okay, in the mask, okay? So I'm basically getting rid of some of that selection. Okay, good. Now I can go back to this mask here, and so I'm just exaggerating to see where that mask is. So it's still a little in there, but I don't mind it too much, okay? All right. Again, I feel a little too green, so I'm going to go a little towards magenta here in the tint. Add some more contrast in that thing. And let's see what that looks like before, after. That's pretty good. Could maybe add a little more contrast just so that the whites are whiter and the darks are darker. Okay, good. Pretty happy with that. And I think the grass should be still warmer. So I'm going to go ahead and create another mask, and this time a linear gradient, and I'm just going to do it this way, something like this, just a gradient, right? So it's going to be affected in this area here, and here I'm going to go considerably more magenta and considerably warmer. Okay, so that really was quite transformative. It does a nice contrast with the sky. It's a little unrealistic, I realize, because you wouldn't have that kind of blue and that kind of grass, but I like it. Okay, something like that. Let's go back to our spotlight over here, see if we can accentuate it a bit. There you go. And you know what? I want to add a little bit of clarity to this oval, to sort of almost like there's more focus on it. So I'm going to go ahead and sharpen that a bit there. Add some clarity. That's pretty cool. Okay, make it a little wider. Okay, let's go to our overall adjustment here. I do think it would be cool if there was a little overall clarity to give that. That's not in detail. I think it's in effects here. And let's see what we got. 17. Oh, that's pretty strong. Before, after. Okay, it definitely gives you that sort of poster look. I but I kind of like it. It might need, I think my blacks are a little too black now. So let's go to our lights and let's go to our, open up the shadows a bit here. Maybe bring down the highlights just a tad. Add a bit of contrast. That's pretty good. Maybe open up the shadows even more. That's pretty good, right? Before, after. Okay. Now, there's a lot of changes in there, so let's hit OK. And you'll see if I hide this, this was before and that was after, okay? So it's considerably different, definitely more magenta and definitely warmer. I'm pretty happy with it. Now let's go and do the corrections or the color on the Cowboy. So here you can just double click on this image here and it'll take you back to the camera raw. And so this is the original, you know, as it was shot. And let's see, what do we want to do? Maybe slightly darker so that we can lighten different parts later in a second. More contrast. I think I need to probably open up the shadows and lower the highlights. So I'm going to go ahead and do just that. Probably something like this. Bring down the highlights a bit. That's maybe too much. Something like this. My blacks are still way too black, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust that. Something like this. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Before, after. Okay. I'm trying to kind of bring those tones. The highlights were too bright here, and I'm gonna probably have to adjust the hand, which was pretty close to the flash there, manually. But for now, that's pretty good. Let's see the color. I don't think I need to change the temperature. I can leave that. Tint seems fine. I do want to kind of desaturate the blues a bit, so I'm going to bring down the vibrance. Something like this. Maybe that's a bit too much. Something like that. Okay, I like that. And let's go to the effects. Let's add a little bit of texture. And we can zoom in here to get a better idea of what's happening. Okay, so before, after, the light, before, after. See, we got some detail out in the hair. So I like that. All right, we added a little bit of texture, and let's add a lot of clarity. I know this can be overdone. I'm trying to get a sort of a poster-ish look, and that definitely adds that feeling of you know how the movie posters used to be. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I'll have to see how it looks like with the background in there, but for now, let's just hit OK. And that's the magic of smart objects, is nothing was destructive. I can just double click on camera raw. I'm right back into here, or the same thing with the Cowboy, just double click on here, and all those adjustments are exactly as I had them. So I do feel that my blacks are still too dark, so maybe open that up a bit. Same with the shadows, just a bit more. Bring down the highlights. Okay, and then like I said, I want to get the hand, so let's try that. Let's see if our what I want to do is I just want it right around here. So let's do subject. It picks the whole thing, which is not what I want. So I'm going to take the subject and I'm going to subtract with a brush. Let's make that brush strong and bigger, and I'm just going to basically brush out everything except for that hand. Doesn't actually matter, I could have just brushed right over the hand because it's actually selected, but that's fine. Okay, and then here I can just really bring down those highlights. I might have to bring down the exposure a bit as well. something like that. I don't want the shadows to be too dark, so I'm just trying to kind of match the face there, something like that. Maybe a little more magenta in the tint. That's pretty good. All right, let's hit OK. Boom. All right, definitely flattened. I don't know if you noticed that last change kind of flattened it. We had a lot of contrast in the hand, which didn't really fit with that background. And another thing is I'd like to kind of darken the pants just so that it kind of blends in the end. Also, my blacks are definitely darker in the subject than in the background, so we're gonna have to adjust that. Go back in here, and I'm gonna open up these black point here. That's pretty high. That's 100%. Okay, and I might even open up these shadows. Not too much. Bring down those. Okay, add a little bit of contrast. Okay, that's not too bad. I did want to add, I want to darken the pants kind of in a gradient way. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new mask. This time it's just the gradient. And I'm going to just say kind of like this. And I'm just going to darken it. Okay. Something like that. Hit OK. There we go. So you see, I'm trying to focus a little more attention over here. I feel like the face is a little flat, so let's light that up a bit. Once again, go back into the camera raw. I'm going to pick this time a radial gradient. I'm just going to do a soft sort of something like this. And I'm going to open up the exposure a bit, add some contrast, a little more exposure. Don't want the highlights too strong. And it's kind of making it a little bit redder, so I'm going to go ahead and just desaturate a touch. There you go, something like that. And then I do want to add like a focus point, so a little more clarity. Okay. Hit OK on that. Yeah, it did a little, it's kind of nice. All right, still have a little bit of work here. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the placements and everything else like that. What I like to do once I've placed my objects and everything is I'll create a new layer of everything flattened. I like to keep everything, if I change my mind about the placement or something, I like to keep my layers. So what I do is I hit Command Option Shift E, and that's Control Option Shift E on a PC. What that does is it creates a new layer of everything that's visible. Okay, and then once again I'm going to convert that to a smart object, and I'm going to re-expose it or re-edit it again in Camera Raw, and this time they're together. Okay. The reason I do this is because I'm going to do some color adjustments, I'm going to do some contrast adjustments, and I want them to be together so that whatever color adjustments happens to both the foreground and the background, which helps bring them together. So the first thing we'll do, as I usually do, is I try to bring down the highlights, open up the shadows a little bit, add a little bit of contrast, and let's just do a little bit more of all of that. Something like this. Okay, and then in my color grading, I want my highlights to be kind of warmish, and I want my shadows to be kind of cold. Okay, not too much. If I exaggerate it, you can see what happens here. So I just want it, I want it a little bit, not too much. Okay, and then maybe in the midtones, let's see if we want to cast on that. I don't think we want anything. I'm just going to double click that to reset it. And then in the color, I do feel like it's a little too strong, so I'm going to tone down the vibrance, tone down the saturation a bit. In the effects, I like having a little post-crop vignette to kind of close the image up. Okay, I feel like I got rid of too much vibrance here. Let's just go back here, undo that. The blues are nice. Saturation, maybe just like this. Okay, back to the effects. We have the post-crop vignetting. You can, this is kind of like up to you how you like this. I like it kind of strong. And yeah, overall pretty happy. And you see that all the color grading that I did it both on the foreground and the background, which really helps bring them together. When I hit OK on here, you'll see before I did that, they're pretty similar in color space, but here they're even more so because we've tinted the shadows and tinted the highlights, and that really helps blend your image. So there you go. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this, but if you happen to have the Compositor workstation, okay, now that's a library by Creator Foundry that has all of Joel's backgrounds and a bunch of textures and all kinds of really cool tools for composites. Now, if you don't have it, you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put a link in the description of this tutorial. And this is where, for example, this background came from, and there's just so much to pick from, in which case you wouldn't have to, download that background and drop it in. You just would pick it and from the library and drop it in. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to hide this again. I'll just go to the background here, and if I had picked a different background, what would that look like? I think this background is really amazing, so I'm happy with that. But let's say I'd picked, you see this is the one right here. Had I picked maybe this one, that could have worked too. Anyway, just wanted to show you, for those who do have the Compositor workstation, you didn't have to download that background, but you can just drag and drop it from the library. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out that link in the description, and you'll see what all these tools are. Okay, so this is the composite. I'm pretty happy with it. The outlining process is probably the longest, but let's zoom in. We can see that this is pretty clean, pretty good. All right guys, I hope you learned a lot, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like it and leave a comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And also, if you're interested in the Compositor workstation that I mentioned in the tutorial, be sure to click on the link in the description to get that full set of tools, which is really, really handy when you're doing composites. So I'll see you in the next episode.